Hey there Cosmic Warriors, and welcome back to another video. And if you are new here, my name is Hannah. I am a Western practical astrologer. Okay, so I'm here today with a bit of a new setup. As you can probably tell, we're going to be exploring the different schools of astrology. So this video is the beginning of a set of videos that are to come on the channel. So there's going to be a lot of interesting information, which I really hope that you find to be helpful. Though, of course, before we do dive into this, definitely make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, click the bell, all that good stuff. And if you are interested in any of my services, then you can visit my website, hannahselsewhere.com. You can book a reading with me there. You can also find my practical astrology ebooks, guide, merch, all of that. Cheat sheets are also available. So yes, anyways, I really hope that you find this video to be helpful today. I'm so excited for this. Let's do this. All right, so first things first, there are many schools of astrology, and whilst I will not be going into all of them, like into detail, into depth when it comes to all of them, it is important to see which school suits your needs. So to see which you're most interested in. So on that note, please let us know which school of astrology you are a student of. And at the end of this video, I will just share some of my personal experiences. This is going to be full of information, so it could be a long video, just want to say. And all of the references or all of the sources that I'm using in this video today, you can find in the description box. Definitely make sure to check out all of the sources. And I also have an astrology guide, which contains a lot of the information that we're going to be going over today. So I'll also link that down below if you're interested. Okay, so as most of you know, there is Western astrology and then there is Vedic astrology. I am a Western astrologer, okay, and I do not study Vedic. I know about a few really well-known, amazing Vedic astrologers, and I also know what my Vedic placements are. I don't know much about them, but still, the incredible Vedic astrologers that I want to shout out today are Bridget Love, KRS Channel, and then Joni Patry. If I'm mispronouncing any names, I do sincerely apologize. But yes, I definitely recommend checking out these astrologers. And I do also know that some Western astrologers have transitioned to Vedic. I'm pretty sure Joni did that. But just to give an explanation of Vedic versus Western astrology. So there is something known as the galactic center. Vishnanobha in Vedic terms. And basically this is the center of our galaxy, and then our solar system is located outside of the galactic center, but still within the galaxy. Naturally, the solar system shows the sun in the center with the Earth and all of the planets revolving around the sun. So astrology basically studies the locations and movements of the planets with respect to the Earth. So there is a correlation between the celestial bodies and what we experience on Earth. And what makes Vedic and Western astrology so different is how the heavens are divided, okay? So Vedic and Western astrology divide the sky into very different sectors. And a major difference between Vedic and Western is Vedic division is based on the 12 constellations, and then Western division is based on the 12 seasons. So let's look at Vedic to begin with. Vedic uses the 12 constellations around the Earth. So, of course, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. Therefore, the sky is divided into 12 sectors, with each constellation being 30 degrees, essentially creating a circle, okay? So 12 times 30, 360 degrees. And so since these constellations are defined in relation to the stars, the Vedic zodiac is also called the sidereal zodiac. You've probably heard those terms, okay? Vedic sidereal versus Western tropical. But when looking at Western astrology, well, Western astrology focuses on the position of the sun. As the Earth follows its orbit around the sun, an imaginary line spins, pointing to the different zodiac constellations along the ecliptic, and makes a complete circuit every year. Now, the ecliptic is essentially the path of the sun. And when we look at Earth's orbit around the sun, there are 4 distinct points on the orbit which make up the 4 seasons. There is the spring equinox or the vernal equinox, marking the beginning of spring. Then there is the summer solstice, marking the beginning of summer, the autumn equinox, marking the beginning of autumn, and then the winter solstice, marking the beginning of winter. Do keep in mind here that there is the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. So during the equinoxes, solar energy is equal in both hemispheres. And then during the summer solstice, solar energy is greater in the northern hemisphere, but then during the winter solstice, solar energy is greater in the southern hemisphere. So when those of us up north, I'm saying us because that's where I live, I'm from the northern hemisphere, up north experience a summer solstice, those down south experience a winter solstice. We experience the longest day during the summer solstice and then the longest night during a winter solstice. And then during the equinoxes, day and night are equal. Now the zodiac begins from 0 degrees Aries. The signs are 30 degrees and their names are still the same. Okay, so Vedic and Western astrology, they have the same titles for the constellations for the signs. But the Western zodiac is also known as the tropical zodiac. However, one major difference between Western and Vedic astrology is Western is not fixed. The Earth is tilted slightly, and so the angle of this tilt is around about 23.4 degrees. Of course, there's still some sources out there that suggest it's between 22 to 24, okay, but within that range, right? But this tilt causes one part of the Earth to lean toward the sun while another part leans away. And this is because the Earth's axis wobbles around itself, and the wobble motion is called axial precession of the equinoxes. Now the Earth wobbles because of the gravitational force of the planets, sun and moon, and it's not a perfect sphere either. And it is this wobble that causes the Earth to move slightly backward each year, moving about 1 degree every 72 years or so. Therefore, it takes approximately 2,150 years for the equinox to move through one zodiac sign, and then it takes about say 26,000 or so years for the equinox to move through all 12 zodiac signs. Ultimately though, Vedic is defined by the fixed stars. Western is defined by the seasons. And the difference between the angles of these two zodiacs is called Ayanamsa. I'm sorry, my pronunciation, I do apologize if I'm not pronouncing these correctly. I'm trying my best. So yes, Ayanamsa in Vedic terms and takes into account the precession of the equinoxes. So the Ayanamsa is said to be between 22 to 25 degrees, but 24 degrees is said to be the most popular. So, for example, if your sun is in Aquarius at 20 degrees in Western astrology, your sun is in Capricorn at 26 degrees in Vedic. Or if your moon is in Leo at 25 degrees in Vedic astrology, then your moon is going to be in Virgo at 19 degrees in Western astrology. So now we know the differences between Vedic and Western astrology. Let's explore Vedic today. Let's explore it some more. So the center of the galaxy is very important in Vedic astrology. It is known as Brahman, meaning the creative force, and it also influences life on Earth. And then the center of the galaxy lies in Mula, meaning force. Now Vedic astrology is also known as Jyotish, Jyotish. And this essentially means science of light. And This school of astrology is most commonly practiced in India and is rooted in the Vedas, India's ancient system of knowledge. But it's also mixed with Hellenistic astrology. This is because Hellenistic methods traveled east with the Alexandrian Empire. Now, according to Hindu teachings, life is meant for spiritual growth. Vedic astrology is very much tied to karma, in that a person's karma is directly related to the position of the planets and stars. It was dubbed the science of fate, as it was used to predict the future of a person's career and marriage, so on and so forth. And it was also used to predict battle in war, and so rulers would employ astrologers to really help them out. According to the Vedas, our future is determined by our destiny and our free will. So destiny looks at the situations we encounter throughout our lives, and then free will looks at our actions, how we react to our life's circumstances. And it's our reactions which create more karma. And karma is the relationship between a person's mental or physical action and the consequences following that action. It is also the force produced by a person's actions in one's life that influences what happens to them in their future lives. Essentially, how we react creates karma, which determines the future set of situations we are destined to experience or face. Basically, our free will creates our destiny, okay? So consider Rahu and Ketu, for instance, so the North Node and the South Node. These lunar nodes are strongly associated with past lives, being Ketu, and then as well where we are headed in this life being Rahu. So the nodes are very much linked to karma. Now, something important to note is Vedic astrologers don't use the outer planets, okay? So Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, these are modern day planets in astrology. And whilst Vedic astrology is super spiritual, it can also be used as a helpful and supportive tool for self-development. Yes, you can also explore things like your health, your psychology, your desires, and so on. Though just one final difference that I want to mention here about Western versus Vedic is how Vedic focuses on lunar mansions. These are known as nakshatras. The lunar mansions divided the ecliptic according to the sidereal revolution of the moon around the earth instead of the sun. So there are about 27 to 28 sections, which I'll just show here using my own chart as an example, so you can see these different sections. And each of these sections, they basically show small star clusters. All right, so moving on to ancient/traditional astrology, we will be focusing largely on Hellenistic astrology for this segment. Quick history lesson, though it's probably not going to be quick, it's probably going to take a while. But one of the first civilizations to flourish in Mesopotamia was the Sumerians. This was from around 4000 BCE to 1700 BCE. What majorly changed the civilization of Sumer was the creation of the first ancient empire of Mesopotamia, the Akkadian Empire. Under the rule of the Amorites, Babylon became the capital, and the great empire of Babylonia was established. Here enters the Babylonians, the inventors of astrology. They developed their own form of horoscopes. Old Babylonian texts show the celestial divination, and some of the oldest recorded astrological tablets date back to 2400 BCE. Now, the Babylonians, they developed astrology out of the belief that since gods in the heavens ruled man's fate, these stars could also control the fate of mankind. So the Babylonian star catalogs were written. The earliest of these catalogs was 3 stars each, and when reworked around 1000 BCE, Many more constellations were included, but then later on, the catalogues reduced the constellations to 12. In 539 BCE, Babylon fell to the Persians, and many years later, Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire. Alexander the Great's death in 323 BCE marked the beginning of the Hellenistic period. Now, during the late Hellenistic period, countries in the Mediterranean basin region began practicing Hellenistic astrology. Okay, so this was from around 2nd century BCE to the 7th century CE. Now, by the 4th century BCE, the star catalogues reached the Greeks, and around the 2nd century BCE, Babylonian astrology was mixed with the Egyptian tradition of Decan astrology to create horoscopic astrology. So basically, horoscopic astrology is a form of astrology that uses a horoscope as a way to interpret a particular order of the sun, moon, and planets. And the placements of the celestial objects are said to reflect or correspond with what is happening on Earth during that time. Astrology also spread to other parts of the world, such as China and India, where it merged with other forms of astrology. Refer back to Vedic Astrology. Now, we will not be talking about Chinese astrology, so that is definitely something that you can look more into if you like. Furthermore, with the rise of the Roman Empire, the Hellenistic world gradually started to fall. Okay, so by 31 BCE, this era ended for good. Interestingly though, astrology was practiced throughout the Roman world. The first Roman emperor, Augustus, used his sign, which was Capricorn by the way, on his coins, which I mean, hello, hi Capricorn. He believed that his horoscope foretold his elevation, and ancient Romans had the choice to study astrology, but there were certain rules in place. So for example, professional astrologers were banned from casting the emperor's horoscope. This was because knowing his time of death could act as a political advantage to other nations. Though astrologers were pushed out of Rome, many times you could say that they were seen as the outcasts, but they would return. The Roman people had this love-fear relationship with divination, which, to be honest, you can even see that in today's world. But here's where things really did change. Astrologer and geographer Claudius Ptolemy helped with the development of maps due to his fascination with the stars. Ptolemy wrote about a dozen scientific treatises. His work became incredibly useful to later astronomers, and he is known for refining the theory of the universe called the geocentric model. He saw the universe as a set of nested spheres orbiting around the Earth. However, in 1543, which we will touch more on, okay, Nicholas Copernicus proposed that the sun was at the center, not the earth. Indeed, astrology was once accepted by the ancient Romans, but that slowly changed due to the rise of Christianity in the Roman Empire. Now, astrology started to be seen as un-Christian and was seen as a form of pagan magic. Astrology went from being this form of astronomical knowledge to being viewed as a superstitious practice. Free will being one major issue. Now, similarly, Egypt fell to the Arabian Empire, so this was around 641 CE, and this occurred after the fall of the Roman Empire. And from this point, astrology was not practiced as much. But following the Hellenistic astrology period, medieval astrology began. This took place from around about 700 CE to 1500 CE, so during the Middle Ages. Texts from the ancient past were rediscovered in the Arabic world, and by the 11th century, these texts made their way to Europe. Arab astrologers also added additional points, so the Arabic parts, so they added these to astrology, which I hope to get more into detail when it comes to these things. But by the 13th century, astrology became a part of everyday medical practice throughout Europe. The link between astrology and medicine was significant during the Middle Ages. Physicians had to understand the influences of the planets on the human body and looking at their medications. They would also need to know the exact time that a patient became ill, and the 12 zodiac signs were assigned then a human body part or area. The idea then was that the positions of the planets would affect how the body functioned, and medical astrology was practiced predominantly between the 14th and 16th centuries. This form of astrology was viewed through a more scientific and mathematical lens. Now, during the European Middle Ages, many distinguished universities had chairs of astrology. Astrology flourished even during the Renaissance period. This was from about the 15th century to the 17th century. The inventing of the printing press in the 14th century led to a rapid production of astrological texts, and in 1647, the world's first English textbook was written by William Lilly titled Christian Astrology. It's kind of ironic. But essentially, astrology supported professional astronomers throughout the Middle Ages and during the Renaissance. However, by the 17th century, many astronomers rejected astrology. This was because the scientific revolution drastically changed scientific thought. The scientific revolution replaced the Greek view. Astrology was no longer seen as compatible with modern science. Both astrology and alchemy were then defined as occult practices. And one of the last Western astronomers to practice astrology around this time was Johannes Kepler. Now, before we do move on to modern astrology, I want to explore traditional / Hellenistic astrology. We're just going to say traditional to make things easier. So this type of astrology focuses more on an individual's outer experience, and I would say that it's quite similar to Vedic in that it pays close attention to fate and circumstances and karma, and it even looks at free will, I would say. Now, this isn't to say that traditional astrology can't be used for psychological reasons or as a way to explain someone's characteristics, but there can be more of this literal feel to traditional astrology, which I am coming to learn is much more to the point. And in traditional astrology, the 7 classical planets are used, which are the Sun, Moon being luminaries, and then Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And each of the planets is assigned to 2 signs. And then when looking to the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, well, these planets were not discovered until the 1700s. And so traditional astrologers typically do not assign these planets to a sign, though there are traditional astrologers who use these planets in their practice. Though another thing here, traditional astrologers use the whole sign system. Now, I don't think I've heard of a Hellenistic astrologer more specifically using a different house system. I don't think I've heard of that before. I could be wrong. You know, if you're one of those people, hi to you. Though for more information about house systems, I did make a video about a few of them in astrology. I will link that video down below. But yes, traditional astrologers use whole sign houses. All right, so let's now get into modern astrology. And I'm going to be honest here, I find the unfolding of modern day astrology to be super exciting and interesting. Okay, so by the 20th century, astrology began to gain popularity again. The rise of spiritualism throughout the 1800s and 1900s impacted astrology's growth. In fact, modern spiritualism began in the 1840s in the small town in New York. With the outset of the Civil War, the number of spiritualists in the USA grew. More people turned to mediums to communicate with their loved one's soul. However, the number of skeptics and fakes also increased. Essentially, people during this time developed an interest in the paranormal. Occult subjects became trendier, and naturally, there was also the revival of astrology. Now, one of the major astrologers who played a role in astrology's revival throughout the late 1800s to early 1900s was British astrologer and Theosophist Alan Leo. Interestingly, he was a Leo, kind of funny. But still, Alan Leo is often seen as the father of modern astrology. He was a very successful businessman as well. Not only did he write a series of astrological textbooks, but he also founded an astrology magazine in 1890, and he built a thriving organization. Now, one of the biggest changes he made to astrology was the shift from predictive astrology to character astrology and personal analysis. It was him who said character is destiny. He was considered an esoteric astrologer. Esoteric astrology looks at astrology from the soul's point of view. And so through his dedication, Leo created a renewed interest in astrology. Now, by the 1930s, sun sign astrology grew in popularity due to horoscopes being printed in newspapers. In fact, the first real newspaper horoscope column is widely credited to British astrologer R.H. Naylor. However, it is said that William Lilly was the first newspaper astrologer in the 17th century. Still, by 1937, Naylor began writing a column for the paper titled Your Stars, and his horoscopes were based on the 12 star signs, zodiac signs. French-born American and astrologer Dane Rudhyar was another pioneer of modern astrology, so specifically transpersonal astrology. He coined the term Humanistic Astrology, and in 1969 founded the International Committee for Humanistic Astrology. His astrological perspective was influenced greatly by the occultist and astrologer Mark Edmund Jones, and also by philosopher Jan Smuts, and also by psychologist Carl Jung. Basically, he joined astrology with Jungian psychology. He suggested that the stars were pictures synchronistically aligned to human beings, and that they did not have direct effects on human life. He saw the stars as psychological forces working within individuals, but humans still have the freedom to respond to such forces. One of his well-known works is The Astrology of Personality. This was in 1936. Fascinatingly, Carl Jung recognized that astrology provides a psychological description of character. He suggested that a person's birth chart could provide insights into that patient's soul, intended for them to achieve. Jung found a wealth of spiritual and psychological meaning in astrology. He understood astrology through a lens of archetypes derived from the collective unconscious. In fact, it was Jung who first used the term archetype in 1919. Archetypes are universal inborn models of people, behaviors, and personalities that play a role in influencing human behavior. Much like there are 12 zodiac signs used in astrology today, Jung identified 12 archetypes during his time. These archetypes were sage, innocent, explorer, ruler, creator, caregiver, magician, hero, outlaw, lover, jester, and the regular person. I remember a few years ago, I really wanted to create a series where I linked the 12 signs with these archetypes to try and see, were they related in some way? Did not follow through with that, but that was an idea that I had. Maybe that is something somebody else could look into sometime. But I did create the psychology series, so I will link that series down below. It's actually based on Jungian psychology, so looking at astrology and Jungian psychology together. Now, as previously mentioned, modern astrology also welcomed new planets. In fact, in 1608, the world's first telescope appeared in the Netherlands. A few men claimed to have invented the telescope, but Dutch spectacle maker Hans Lippershey usually gets the credit. Thanks to the invention of the telescope, astronomers could discover planets further afield. In 1981, Uranus was discovered by William Herschel, by accident, by the way. I know, so Uranus. In 1846, Neptune was discovered by Johann Gottfried Galle, and in 1930, Pluto was discovered by Clyde Tombaugh. The discoveries of these planets affected and changed astrology in progressive ways. This was because each planet would rule a particular sign. Uranus would rule Aquarius, okay, with Saturn being the traditional ruler. Neptune would rule Pisces, with Jupiter being the traditional ruler, and then Pluto would rule Scorpio, with Mars being the traditional ruler. However, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are referred to as generational planets. They stay in one sign for longer than the original 7. Asteroids were also being discovered, so the first being Ceres in 1801 by Giuseppe Baezi, and according to NASA, in 2006, scientists classified Ceres as a dwarf planet, but astrologers still typically consider Ceres an asteroid. That's just basically the name. Okay, a lot of astrologers just say asteroid when it comes to Ceres, but it's technically a dwarf planet. It's classified as that. Even think about Pluto. You know, we still say Pluto as a planet. We'll still say Pluto as a planet, but technically it is a dwarf planet. Anyway, a year after the discovery of Ceres, Pallas was discovered in 1802 by Henrik Wilhelm Matthias Olpers. Then Carl Ludwig Harding discovered Juno in 1804, and in 1807 Vesta was discovered by the same person who discovered Pallas. Naturally, there are many asteroids that have been discovered over the years, but the first 4, being Ceres, Pallas, Juno, and Vesta, are the most well known in astrology at present. You could say that they are the major asteroids. One of the major astrological pioneers, though, of the 20th century was none other than Linda Goodman. Her famous book, Sun Signs, published in 1868, captured the attention of many. By the time of her death in 1995, her book sold over 30 million copies, and it continues to sell over 200,000 copies each year. In 1978, Linda Goodman published Love Signs. In 1987, she published Star Signs, and in 1998, Relationship Signs was published. Indeed, she became one of the most influential astrology writers of the 20th century, and she is recognized as one of the greats. Other remarkable astrology authors, writers throughout the 20th century include Liz Green, Astrology for Lovers, for example, 1986. Howard Sasportas, I've been saying Sasportas, but I think it may be pronounced Sasportas. Anyway, he published the 12 Houses. This was in 1985. I really enjoy Liz Green and Howard Sasportas for their psychological elements. Then there is also Jan Spiller, who published Astrology for the Soul in 1997. Then Johanna Martine Wolfuk. So looking at the only astrology book you'll ever need, published in 1982. Though turning our attention to the 21st century, astrology has become so much more accessible than ever before. With the help of social media, there have been thousands of astrologers online offering their services. Some of the first astrologers to broadcast horoscopes on YouTube include Braca Goldsmith in 2009, Pam Gregory, 2014, Kelly Rossano in 2012, and then even looking at the popularity of astrology podcasts, there is even the Astrology podcast, which is perhaps the most well-known astrology podcast. This began in 2012, I believe, hosted by Chris Brennan, and it's his podcast, and this has proven to be a huge success. Though, just a wee shout out for a podcast that I like, that would be The Stars Made Me Do It podcast. I'm not sure when they started that podcast, but I enjoy that podcast. It's fun to listen to, and also you get good information, and the 3 women who host that podcast. Really lovely. So yeah, I recommend. Moreover, there is also Uranian astrology and harmonic astrology, which I'm not really going to get into today, but definitely feel free to look up these schools of astrology, okay? I know of a great Uranian astrologer on Instagram. His name is Matt. You can check him out at uranian.astrologer.matt. Yeah, and all these people that I'm mentioning today, I'll most likely link them all. So yeah, you can find the information down below in the description box. But yes, there are more bodies in Uranian astrology, such as Cupido, Zeus, Hades, and so on. Not gonna lie, very interesting to me. I'm like, oh, I wonder what they're about, because just the names, the titles themselves intrigue me. Yes, Uranian astrology is very new, very modern. And then also astrocartography, very new. This type of astrology was popularized in the 1970s by Jim Lewis. I do have a video about astrocartography, so if you're interested to learn more, you can check that out. There's also content available about astrocartography on YouTube, but essentially astrocartography is locational astrology, okay? So you kind of want to look at your own travel map. It's really quite interesting when you look into it, but there is an astrologer that I would recommend here, and that would be Pernell Bobby. So you can find Pernell Bobby, astroshaman.pernellbobby. I'm pretty sure he offers astrocartography readings as a service, so he's going to give you much more in-depth information about that. Okay, so the last modern school of astrology that I want to mention today is Evolutionary Astrology. I remember getting into this school of astrology early on, but then I fell off. So this school of astrology is very, very new. Jeffrey Wolf Green is the founder of this school of astrology. He combines elements of psychological astrology, Indian philosophy, and theosophy. So thinking about spiritualism and mysticism being combined with metaphysics. An evolutionary astrologer who comes to my mind is Simon from Raising Vibrations. But to explain further, evolutionary astrology focuses a great deal on Pluto and the lunar nodes, so looking at the karmic lessons tied to these things. This school of astrology looks at the journey of the soul. This school of astrology sees a person's birth chart as a map of their spiritual path. And it was also well-known astrologer Stephen Forrest who popularized evolutionary astrology due to his many books. He is also one of the founders of the evolutionary school. Overall here, when looking at modern astrology, it is said to be much more psychological than external. It focuses on a person's inner world. And modern astrology also incorporates the outer planets. Modern astrology is very innovative. The developments which branch from the original form of astrology. And this is interesting really to think about, considering psychology started to really flourish during the mid-late 1800s. Wilhelm Wundt and William James. So yeah, they were the founders of psychology and looking at it as a science and as an academic discipline, which is distinct from philosophy. But what about traditional astrology, you might ask? Well, it's having its own revival. It has been for the last 30 years or so. So from the 1990s, yeah, interest has really sparked when it comes to traditional astrology, specifically looking here even at Hellenistic Astrology, okay? Yeah, interest has increased, and this is because original astrological texts have been rediscovered and they've been translated. And from that, then, we are starting to notice more and more Hellenistic astrologers today. Okay, so those are all the different schools of astrology that I wanted to explore today, but let me just share some of my personal experiences. Okay, so at the beginning of my astrology journey, I suppose, you know, when I got into astrology, I gravitated toward psychological astrology. And I don't think that was done for any, you know, reason other than that was the thing that was available at the time. I actually didn't really realize when I first got into astrology that there were all of these other schools, but then after learning more about astrology itself, then I realized, oh my gosh, you know, there's all different forms. So yeah, I would say psychological astrology is the most interesting in my opinion, because I also am fascinated by psychology as a subject. I'm really into, you know, analytical psychology. Even thinking about Jung's work really interests me. Then I stumbled upon evolutionary astrology, which I find fascinating as well. I just think diving into the psyche overall is just really interesting to me, and for me it's been largely about self-discovery. It's been largely about, okay, trying to explore my subconscious, or, you know, why I am the way I am, and even diving into the past, you know, looking at my childhood, looking at my upbringing. And it's I suppose in a way it's really helped, because I have been in group psychotherapy for 3.5 years now. So that has been a good portion of time, whilst also studying astrology, which I've really appreciated in a way, because I've been actually able to see, you know, how are these things related for myself. So that's been really cool. But recently I have been considering Hellenistic astrology in terms of just wanting to learn more about it, or wanting to understand, you know, the philosophies behind it, or even looking at philosophy in general, which I'm going to talk more about in the next video. Philosophy would be a whole area that honestly I don't really have very much experience with, but I do find the question of, you know, free will versus fate to be really fascinating. So anyways, that is where I stand right now. I use the whole sign system. I prefer to use the whole sign system. And I would also say that I am more of a modern astrologer, but I do also use traditional techniques. And I think both can exist together. This is the thing. I think they can. I think you can kind of maybe find a balance with them. Anyway, I do want to explore more about this, but essentially these are the different schools of astrology, and I really hope that you find this video to be helpful. I've said astrology so many times where it's almost like it doesn't make sense. It doesn't sound right to me. But anyway, I hope you find this video to be helpful. I hope that getting into the history of astrology was useful. Let me know, did you find this video to be helpful? Please, I would really appreciate your feedback, and I have put a lot of work into this video, and I will continue to do so. I want to provide good quality content here. Let me know if you learned anything new. Which school of astrology are you a student of, and why? Let us know why. I would really appreciate your feedback, and like you, I'm always learning. I'm always learning. Again, you can find the sources that I used in this video in the description box. Definitely make sure to check them out, to read those through, to explore more for yourself, to come to your own conclusions, and also check out the people that I've mentioned today. I will link as many people in the description box as possible. And as always, let me know your thoughts and your opinions. But with all that being said, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And of course, if you would like to see more videos from myself and you have not yet subscribed, then make sure that you click that subscribe button, and also give this video a like if you did like it today. And I will be back with another video very, very soon. Bye!